Hello there, how nice to see you. My name is Aston. Welcome and welcome back to this channel. You are very welcome here. I am so excited because in this moment right now, I'm starting a new project. And the idea arrived to me all of a sudden this morning, and I've just been thinking about it, kind of sketching it out for hours. And even though it's late at night at the moment, I'm really compelled, moved to start it. And I think it might be interesting if I film the whole thing from start to finish and talk about how the road is kind of unfolding. It seems to be that kind of thing where I'm following the idea and just the road of the idea is just building itself in front of me, and I feel so excited and grateful that the idea arrived. I mean, we'll see how it turns out, you know, maybe it's not all that, but I'm excited, and this feeling is what gets me so jazzed about art and also life. Okay, so long story short, I guess a synthesis of a lot of different things in my life led to this idea, but also some of the materials, my artist materials, are really inspiring this idea, and I want to show you. Particularly the Holbein watercolor granulating paint that I got in Japan, and the Holbein artist gouache Irodori, the Colors of Japan collection that I also picked up while I was in Japan. And particularly the colors that have a lot of bloom. So like pigment kind of spreading out or grouping together. I think it's also called cauliflower effect. But I'm gonna take you in up close and show you what I mean. I think the first thing ever when I saw granulating paint, the properties of the material made me think about looking at a map and cartography, geography, topography, because this really looks like an area on the map, like a mountain range or a desert or a sea, like a natural landscape within the way that the pigments are settling into the paper. This one, it's like a very organic, to me, kind of natural formation, but the color doesn't necessarily have to be true to earth for me to still feel that connection. Wow, this one, I wonder if other people see that as well. What do you see when you look at granulating paint? So, I'm not going to say too much but yes, maps is the overall theme, and oh, let me just show you some of these ones. This one, this one, this one, also kind of fractally, which is a pattern also found in nature. This one, these guys, And on this side, up top, wow, the greens in this whole collection. This one, this blue, I mean, look at that gradient. I've been painting a lot with these and loving them, PS. This one. So I think I'm going to start with the colors from both of those collections that give me the most, or the clearest granulating effect, and also bloom or bloom. Okay, I'll talk to you about what I'm gonna do next. Ooh, also, I'm like going through my entire art supply collection, and as I've been working with these materials, old and new, I keep like looking for my swatch cards, or my swatch references, and I thought, why don't I just put them up on the wall where I can see it, next to some Georgia O'Keeffe postcards. I'm just gonna put it up on the wall. My reference will be there, but just looking at the materials is inspiring. Okay, so I'm about to get going with this experiment, and I think that I have everything that I need. So what I'm about to do right now is just try out some of my ideas, trying out concepts and how I think things might come together technically. This is really helpful, and just not putting any pressure on myself to make like a finished, polished thing. So these are the materials that I'm going to use, and because of some earlier experiments I made for another project, I have been experimenting with painting on a transparency. Like if you are in my generation, you will remember the overhead projector from growing up in school, and I've been playing around with that kind of thing, like using transparency sheets of paper just for doing arty things, and I've really been enjoying that. But the technique and the effect that I wanted on my earlier transparency experiments, perhaps insert photo here, I have been documenting that process, but not quite as in-depth. So I knew that I wanted to make them textured, so I could use my granulating watercolors, and also, I guess I haven't used gouache on them. This will be a first for that. But my granulating watercolors probably would not stick to the transparency alone. So I got this Daniel Smith watercolor ground, and just kind of figuring out how to use it. And that different other project was the first time that I had used watercolor ground. Essentially, it will turn a non-watercolor friendly surface into a watercolor friendly surface. But there are some rules and directions. Let's see. It creates a paintable surface for watercolor. Okay, I can use it on canvas, paper. Okay, on absorbent surfaces, you can just apply it. But for something like the transparency, it says for non-absorbent surfaces, glass, plastic, metal, for best results, these will need to be abraded before application of the ground. Thick brushable and heavily pigmented. Allow 24 to 48 hours to cure before applying watercolor. Yada, yada, yada. And this is the transparent one, transparency. Let's see, here they are. I have one that's just like straight up transparent, and I have another one that's kind of a milky color, like a milky transparency. Okay, here with the transparencies. The first time I tried this technique, putting a watercolor ground on top of a transparency, I was more deliberate with the pattern that I made with the sandpaper, and then when I put the paint on top, or the watercolor ground on top of the sanded layer, I also tried to go in the same direction. And those, I think came out cool. But you know what? If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have put the pieces together to try doing this. So, I'm just trying to scratch up the surface, and let's speed these up. I'm going to sand both, and then I'm going to do one layer of watercolor ground. So here I am preparing the transparency for the watercolor ground. I'm using sandpaper as an abrasive to scratch up the transparency so the watercolor will have something to hold on to, the watercolor and gouache. If I didn't scratch up the transparency, the watercolor ground would have nothing to hold on to, and the paint would have nothing to hold on to, and it would all slide off the smooth surface. I'm not really worried about making a pattern or anything. I'm just scratching up the surface of each transparency as much as possible before I apply the watercolor ground. So once these are nice and scratched up from the sandpaper, I will start applying one coat of the watercolor ground, and I'm really trying to get a lot of texture on the page by using a very old brush. Welcome back. Same evening, a little time has passed, and right now I'm just going to make a chart, a smaller swatching card of the colors from the larger swatch cards that are calling out to me the most, either with granulation and or bloom effect. In my experience, making a limited color palette is super helpful in making a project cohesive. So at first, when I'm choosing the palette, I cast a pretty wide net, and then as I keep doing little experiments, I sort of narrow it. It narrows down naturally. But yeah, I think I definitely tend to choose more colors up top and then get more specific as I go on. And I've made this little chart on a scrap piece of paper that it's just a system. It lays out how the paints are arranged in their pans, so I can know what color is where. So that's what that little thing is on the paper. I have a strange system. So after I choose my limited color palette, I will test it in a painting and see how all of the colors look together. And yeah, but it happens pretty naturally, deciding which ones will stay and which ones will go. So I think I did some materials tests with watercolor ground on watercolor paper, which just was pretty redundant. It didn't do much, but sink into a paper that's already made to receive watercolor. But I did do some test paintings on top of those materials tests. But yeah, I didn't end up using watercolor paper in the final maps, but I wanted to try just to see what it would look like on top of the Lightboard watercolor paper. And those early watercolor paper tests really helped me narrow down my limited color palette. So let me tell you the story of how this idea began. I had never used granulating watercolor or very high quality like artist gouache before these two paint sets, and I was so inspired by just the natural properties of the paint when you use a lot of water, and the way that the blooms look and the granulation separation really reminded me of looking at a map, either just like a geography map or a topography map. And I like maps. I also have always been interested in imaginary landscapes. I had also been wanting to do an art project with transparency sheets on top of a Lightboard and paint on it. So I had to figure out how to get paint on the transparency, which is why I did so many materials tests. But I had the idea to put the map on the transparency because the idea reminded me of a globe, like a light up globe. And I thought it might turn out really cool if I can figure out how to get the paint on the transparency and make it textured. So here I'm starting my first test painting with my limited palette. And ironically, this is the painting that I like the least, but I have the most footage of painting it. So I'll continue with the story. And the maps became like a mental, emotional map when I think a friend had asked me how I was doing, how are you? And I answered, I'm, like always, just teetering between hope and despair. And I started thinking it might be really interesting. What if hope and despair were real places, real locations on a map? And really that's how the idea arrived to me, to make it an interior map instead of an exterior map. And you can travel around to beautiful destinations, or some of the names of the location, are less beautiful. But that's life. It's all of these contradictions and dichotomies and ups and downs, and I think that's how and why the facts of life theme song made it into a location on the map. You take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have. So although this watercolor test painting is my least favorite, I did learn a lot about what kind of brush strokes will give the desired effect that I'm looking for to look like land or mountains or deserts or rivers or bodies of water. So it was a useful experiment, even if I'm not happy with how the painting turned out. I learned a lot about how to use the paint and the paintbrush to make the kind of shapes that I wanted to make the overall painting look more like a map. When I'm starting a new art project and using materials I don't really know how to use yet, or if I can see the idea in my head but I have no idea how to make it happen, I will set up a lot of experiments for myself, and I really enjoy setting them up and doing them. And it's interesting, I'm not a very organized person, but in designing my art experiments and testing materials, I can be like very organized, and it feels very scientific and also very fun. And through doing these experiments, I find my way to the effect that I'm after, or I figure out how to actually do the project and make it a reality. So this painting was not my favorite, but here's the next test painting on watercolor paper, and this is so much better already. These shapes are more geographic and more what I'm looking for. I remember this next part being especially fun because now I have some test paintings. I can actually put them on the Lightboard and see how they look. For a while I was thinking about layering the paintings and which looks better, a watercolor paper painting or a painting on transparency. And I felt like the watercolor paper wasn't transparent enough, and the transparency just on the Lightboard was too intense, so I needed to find something to layer with the transparency to give it that kind of globe effect that I'm looking for. So I tried all kinds of different things. I tried like a soft blue vellum paper and a brown paper bag and blank newsprint. And the ones I liked the most were the blue vellum and the blank newsprint. And that's what I ended up choosing in the end for the final maps, is the newsprint behind the transparency. It really gives it that map feeling also. So I'm about to set up another round of tests for myself. Second round surface prep and tests. And it's good I made a little note to myself so I could remember what I was doing in these time-lapse videos. And I think these are some of the actual beginnings of the maps that I used in the project. I think these ones got 2 coats of watercolor ground and I let it dry over time, but I think I maybe didn't get that footage for some reason. Now I'm starting the painting process, and this is where it gets really fun. In this maps project, I combined the Holbein Gouache Irodori sets with the Holbein Granulating watercolor. That first painting was supposed to be just a test, I think, but I liked it so much I used it as one of the maps. So, okay, here we go. These are other transparencies that are getting a second layer of watercolor ground, and I'm really making certain shapes on purpose to trying to create a more of a 3D landscape effect with the watercolor ground. I did come back to these the next day. I gave them the full drying time and started to paint. This map becomes the Doi No Doi island map, and I'll talk about how I chose the locations and how I arranged them a little later on in the video. But that was this painting, followed by I think this is assessment. And I fell more and more in love with both of these paint sets. And I think the effect of mixing them together is really cool. I got very excited when Holbein North America reposted my maps post on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram, say hello. And these are photos of the final project, how it looked with the locations on and on top of the Lightboards. I did show these in a little gallery show in November, and I hung them all up on the wall next to each other. So you can see how they all look together. And I also had professional prints made, and I actually just put them up in my Etsy shop. I'll leave a link in the description. But they're 8.5 by 11 matte velvet giclée prints. They're all signed and numbered. And I also have 2 other prints available, one of a portrait of my cat and one of the King Kakuji landscape. Here I am packaging them all up nicely. And if you order a print, thank you so much for supporting this channel and my small art business. The prints turned out better than I expected, and they're really, really beautiful. Here's a slow-mo of all of the options that are available now in my Etsy shop. Here's a little photo of me at the gallery show with the maps and the other 2 artworks. I think they came out really great, and I'm pleased with the end result. This is the time-lapse from Procreate. I did all the text in the Procreate app. And Procreate, if you're listening, I love Procreate so much. I love the app. I use it all the time. But please give us curved text, as you'll see as we continue to watch all the text go in place. I had to hand curve all the text, and it took a really long time. I spent a lot of time on placement also without curving the text, but map 1 took me almost 6 hours, map 2 took me almost 2 hours, and map 3 took me almost 5 hours. So if you're listening, please give us curved text. This brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this behind the scenes process, and I will see you very soon in the next video.